Unmute.
Good morning, Chair.
I said good morning.
I could
figured
tell.
You figured that. Morning, Ken.
Good morning.
Morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
Hey.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect.
And are we waiting for Christian?
Chair, I know that we have Todd with us in the audience at least, but I don't see Christian yet.
Okay. Well, maybe we can go ahead and get started and just do the preliminaries, and then Mr. Burnish can join us. All righty. Well, good morning, everybody. And at this time, we'll call to order the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal informal session for April 1st, 2021. And Commissioner Burschauer, would you please lead us in the pledge?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, thank you, everybody, and welcome. It's a beautiful day. The sun is shining. It's Easter, Passover, Resurrection Week, and it's a beautiful week. So we're very, very glad that you're all joining us today. And there's Christian, so we can get going.
And Chair, if I may, it's really nice being virtual so that I don't have to worry about what prank you're going to pull on me, given that it is April 1st.
Well, I tell you what, you never know. So let's get going with the calendar session. Do we have anything additional to our normal joint session, joint calendar? Nothing?
No, Chair.
Okay, thank you all. So we'll move on to public comment, and we have received public comment, and there is Ken,
Chair.
yes.
I'm sorry, Chair. Thank you. Just wanted to quickly, we have some requests that have come forward and some items that we need to get on the calendar. And so I don't think the first question is to Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue, TVF&R. They're asking to schedule a presentation for either the 15th or the 22nd of this month to present a State of the District presentation. And I know we have several land use hearings that are coming up as well. I just wanted to see if there was a preference from the board on scheduling TVF&R for the presentation, 15th or the 22nd.
So our next land use is the 15th, is that correct?
I believe so.
The 8th.
Or the 8th, correct.
Yep. So does the 15th work for everybody?
Chair, the 15th works for me.
Okay, Commissioner Burschauer? Okay, so let's do that so we can hear from TVF&R and
then the other item that we need to get on the schedule, and I'll probably just do this via email because we also need to coordinate it with the sheriff and the jail commander. We need to schedule a jail / juvenile detention tour. We do these on an annual basis, and we'd like to get some dates on the calendar to make these happen. So that was something that I just wanted to give you a heads up. We'll probably do that via email and see which dates are going to work best for everyone. And then the last item that I had on my list, which is really tied to the first work session item, I believe Abhishek is going to have some dates, some proposals for some discussions. And so that's going to be something else that we'll try to monitor and track on when the board would like to, how you'd like to proceed with getting some additional dates on the calendar.
Sounds good.
And then the very last item I had, because we don't necessarily have that on the agenda for today for discussion, but I know there's a lot of questions and discussion. We had this discussion last week about the American Recovery or the American Rescue Act, about getting some possible work sessions on the agenda to have some discussions about both budgetary, some strategic planning related to it, and so we didn't put it as a set work session, but I'm not sure how soon the board would like to schedule a work session to at least start having additional conversations like we had last week.
Ken, when do you think we'll have more information about what these are going to look like?
Well, I think we were all on the meeting with Senator Merkley yesterday, and there really wasn't a lot of new information that really came out of that, because it sounds like everyone is still waiting to receive guidance from the Treasury. I do know that we are getting requests and inquiries about the funds. I think it would be good to have some of these discussions before we have budget committee, because I believe there's going to be some discussions that you may want to have with the board on some policy direction that will in turn generate some work that I'll have to prepare in building into the 22 or the 21-22 proposed budget. And so being ready for the budget committee meetings, so I'm kind of hoping that we'd at least have at least one work session or some of this discussion in the next couple weeks.
And we have that discussion with NECO and AOC on the 9th.
Correct.
And maybe we'll have a little bit more information since everybody's in the same boat.
Yes, fingers crossed.
So maybe we could plan one for the following week.
That's what I was going to propose, is that 15th. I think we'll probably have enough information. That is 2 weeks from now. So I think that would be great.
Right. Why don't we,
Sure. I think that's fine.
at least for some initial discussions, does that sound good? And we'll know more, hopefully more than we got yesterday, but more on the 9th.
Because the other part, the only other definitive kind of timeline is the legislation as passed. We're supposed to receive the first disbursement of funds within 60 days of passage, and so that's supposed to be May 10th, on or around May 10th, that we'll get the first disbursement from the Treasury. So that's why I'm, so we should have some more guidance from US, from the Treasury by that point.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
Yes, Commissioner.
Chair, as part of, thank you, as part of guiding or helping move along our discussion for our first work session, I think it would be helpful if we could get some information, and maybe we could just task Abhisha or Ken, and he decides who, with identifying the more restricted funds that have been set up, so that we are maybe more strategic in how we plan out our own use of what I'm at least seeing as more less restricted funds. So if we had that information with us when we go into a work session, I would find that to be very helpful.
That's great. Do we even have anything along those lines? We know timelines. We know that some of it, there will be disbursements, and then was it in a year? Within a year, we're going to have another payout. So I think what we do know, and whatever restrictions, it's been really minimal though, hasn't it, Ken?
Yes, the information has been very general, but NECO put together a really nice analysis. If you haven't seen that, I will share it with the board. If you haven't received an analysis that NECO had done here recently, because in speaking to Commissioner Kula, what he was calling out was there's the county distribution, and then each city's also getting distributions, and then there's specific program areas that are also included under the act that there's still a lot of questions about where those funds, you know, on how you access those funds. Is it through the state? Is it through a federal agency, depending on the program requirements? But there are some other elements to the act that are not related to the county allocation. That there's some capital project funds is one that stands out there, and rental assistance, I think, is another one that's a large category that's separate from that. And so I can share that, and we can be prepared to have those discussions as part of the April 15th work session as well.
Sounds good. So we can, yes, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Senator Merkley indicated that there's quite a few separate funds. I wrote down small business, childcare, higher ed, K-12, et cetera. So I think the tricky part for us is going to be figuring out, you know, how competitive those funds might be and how likely it would be for us to receive any. But in terms of the county funds, I mean, other than he said that you can't lower taxes, that's the only thing that's really banned. It doesn't seem like there's, you know, many strings attached. So
Chair, if I may.
Yes, Commissioner.
Commissioner Bershauer, that is what I have seen as well, and so I'm glad I'm glad that you were reading it that way. I recognize that county administrator needs real specifics in order to do his due diligence, but I am with you in seeing that there are very few restrictions for that county specific money.
Okay, thank you. All right, so more will be revealed, as they say, and we'll discuss more on the 15th. Ken, anything else?
No, I think that's it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so public comment, item D. We have received public comments, and I want to thank Carolina because even up to 10 o'clock, she's getting the very last of them out to us. So I appreciate that, Carolina, and sometimes we have to send her an email and tell her to go home. So thank you for that yesterday and today, and also thank you to everybody who took the time to send an email. We do appreciate it, and they all go into the public record. So we'll move on to item E, which is our work session, and it's reserved for topics of discussion for the commissioners in advance. And our work session today is a review discussion of SEDCOR's quarterly report and the Project Oasis Child Care update. And Abisha Stone is with us. Thank you, Abisha. Lots to report. Thank you.
Good morning. Hi. I was trying to get my screen to work here.
There you are. We see you.
Good. Okay, now I see you as well. So good morning, Chair. Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners, Ken and Christian. Also, good morning to Carrie and Carolina. I agree with your assessment, Chair. Those gals work hard behind the scenes, and I certainly appreciate them. So good morning to everyone. So we have a couple of things to cover today. So I just wanted to set the stage for how I think it's probably best to run through these. So as usual, right, I'm coming before you today for a quarterly update, which I provided in writing on Friday. So I will just review, my plan is to review kind of the highlights of that report, and then offer an opportunity for any questions. Tim Murphy from BCI will be joining us for the Project Oasis update. So then we'll switch to the Project Oasis update, and then we'll dismiss him so he can get back to his day job doing the good work that he does. And then we'll go into the last section, which is my recommendation for approach in developing county priorities. And this speaks to the conversation you were just having. It is one of those components that can help structure how you think about using the American Rescue Act funds. So if that sounds good, I'll go ahead and dive in.
Great. Sounds great. Thank you.
Good. Okay. And at some point, I will also be screen sharing. So I just wanted to give a reminder to Carrie to make sure I have access to do that. Okay. So for the quarterly report, I kind of opened reminding folks that we really do want to be thinking about this next year in the context of a different language maybe than we were using last year. There was a lot of conversation about unprecedented times and having to pivot, and certainly all of those things were true. And coming into this year, we're really focusing on economic recovery, building community resiliency, and mindfulness and strategy in planning, right? So we have resources coming our way that have the ability not just to help us through the recovery of last year, but also to help create some more resiliency within our county so that when these types of issues present themselves again in the future, we're better prepared. So a few things, and that's essentially the flavor, if you will, of my report today. So I wanted to make sure that the board continues to be informed about the pressures that we have around buildable industrial lands. So not unlike other counties surrounding us, we do not have as much buildable industrial land as our industry partners who currently are here need in order to expand and grow, or as a tool to use for recruitment. There are a lot of approaches that we can take to identify potential industrial lands and prepare them. So the state has some readiness programs that we're trying to utilize, but this is real work that needs to be done at many different levels. And so I'm bringing this again to the attention of the board as a reminder that these are the things that SEDCOR is keeping top of priority, that our traded sector industry partners are very concerned about, and that I will be coming to you, throughout the year asking for support and guidance and maybe some connections. Workforce remains one of the top 3 issues for our traded sector partners, either behind or just above access to industrial property. There are some great programs that Willamette Workforce Partnership is currently running. I want to make sure that you are aware of the sidewalk program. We talked about this several years ago as a program we were trying to redevelop and bring into Yamhill County. And I'm really excited to announce that the city of Newburgh just solidified their partnership on this program with Willamette Workforce Partnership. And we'll be moving forward with this youth workforce development program. That's the core of what this is. And also providing replacement and repair of defunct and dangerous sidewalks to residents within the county. So Newburgh is the first one to have a chance to really grab onto this program, but we will be expanding this program throughout the county with other interested municipal partners in the coming years. We also continue to support the Workforce Housing Consortium. Again, that's to support the development of workforce. The EDAC, so the Economic Development Advisory Council, the voting members met last week and were led by Kinesis through the unconference approach, which was a strategic sort of a process to help them get to the point of making some recommendations to the board. I did receive the summary of data coming out of that meeting just early this week, and it still needs to be distilled and cleaned up. But this is a tool that we'll be using and talking about at the end of our time together today. Business Retention and Expansion Survey. So as some of you who've been around a little bit longer may recall, some of the early work that SEDCOR did in Yamhill County prior to our contracted service with you all was what we call a BRE survey, Business Retention Expansion. That's a survey of our existing industry partners to help understand what their needs are, what their pressures are, what's happening, kind of what are the trends in their industry. And it's this work that helped us identify things like the need and desire for the wine industry to localize their supply chain, right? So that gives us an understanding of essentially where we need to be spending our time and energy to best support our industry partners. These surveys are done every 3 to 5 years, and SEDCOR is now just starting the survey process again in Yamhill County. You heard me talk about this last year as something that was on the docket for us at the end of the year, so coming into December. I did finally get it completed. We now have our Executive Pulse system up and running in a really established way. And I laugh because I am not the most technically inclined person, so I might be the slowest to learn these, but we're there. So we will be using that software to help execute this BRE survey. Again, coming out of that data, that information will be shared back. So compressed, right? And shared back with the board, also with our municipal partners. There are sections of this survey that speak specifically to the business relationships with the cities and what could be improved there. So there's that component. There's a workforce component that we share back with Willamette Workforce Partnership. So this is not siloed work. This is very partnered work, but it is also very detailed work. So it takes a long time to get these surveys done. So wherein I ask for your excitement, I also ask for your patience, but this work is underway. Broadband expansion. So just like we are today, coming before you with an update on projects that were funded last year. Today, we're going to be talking about Project Oasis, but I wanted to let you know that on June 24th, so my next quarterly report, will be coming before you with Kathy Tate from Online Northwest with an update on the Rural Broadband Expansion Project. One item of note that I want you to be aware of is that hopefully it will be coming live very soon, but they are building a page on their website where community partners and residents can provide input and requests for areas of service, input. They can ask questions. They can get questions answered about this project and what's going on, at least at the level that Online Northwest is engaged. So that will be coming up online very soon. As soon as I have access to that page, I will make sure I send it out to you, because it's a great way also to respond to our community who's asking about information about broadband. Okay, so before we go on to Project Oasis, were there any questions about any of those updates or things I didn't cover?
Commissioners, questions?
Chair, thank you, Abisha. I think that the first question, which is one that we should probably have another conversation about, because it's really not directed at Abisha, is the rhetorical question of how do we get more industrial land for these businesses in the county, and that is a conversation that the Board of Commissioners will need to be engaged in if we feel like it's a priority.
Thank you, Commissioner. One of the things I wanted to just touch base with you, Abisha, is about we talked about rural broadband, and we know that there are lots of opportunities going forward. I've been working with Lyrica a bit, and one of the things we're going to really need to focus on is that GIS data and finding out a little bit more about what the exact areas that are completely unserved, because we have a number of options. We can increase or improve the service, the quality of service to those that already do have broadband, or we can just try to get some level of service to those who have none. And I think we need to be focusing on the areas that have absolutely none, because they've been really limited with remote work, with telehealth, with school, those types of things. So the GIS piece is a big piece, but there's a huge discussion that needs to take place, especially if we do have funds we can allocate to that in a significant amounts of money instead of just little pieces. So that's when I'm looking forward to being able to hopefully find a way to resource that project.
That is, I'm so glad that you brought that up. So Carrie Martin and I have a call Friday, that's tomorrow. So Carrie Martin and I have a call tomorrow with Wes Cochran, who is our regional EDA representative. So Economic Development Administration. All these acronyms, want to make sure I'm saying them out loud. Tomorrow to talk about what resources the EDA can provide for preparing us for this sort of work. The EDA does have a program that Wes shared with us that essentially could fund a countywide needs assessment and a master plan development, right? So what are the needs? And then the master plan doesn't just say, well, we need to figure out a way to cover these areas. It could also include things like, this would be a great area for the sake of redundancy to have wireless, whereas these areas really also need to have fiber embedded. We could include in that some conversation about the emergency communications sort of system. So yesterday, Kathy, Carrie, and I met with Sheriff Svensson and talked about resource sharing for use of towers, what opportunities may exist, what opportunities for leveraging funding, I think as Commissioner Kula was mentioning, because you're correct, Commissioner Sterrett, if this is an area of priority for the board, then we need to have the information that helps us to make good decisions about how to utilize the funding that's coming from American Rescue Act, and also leverage that with how can we get some of potential funding from EDA, or how do we kind of step through that? So now I'm starting to ramble, but I think you understand my thought process here. So I completely agree with you. in hearing these concerns and requests coming from the board, Ken, Carrie, and I have started exploring opportunities. And obviously, before submitting any real requests or making any, submitting any sort of applications or anything, all that comes before the board. This is us just information gathering at this point, but I want you to know that I'm listening to these meetings and I'm hearing those concerns, and behind the scenes, we're talking about how to get more information for you.
Thank you. That's been a big piece. And one real quick question about business to business spending. We know that consumer spending doesn't really drive the train as much as that business to business spending. We did early on, I believe it was before you joined us at SEDCOR, we had looked at some of that supply chain, local supply chain, and that information, so that in terms of, you mentioned the wine industry wanting to localize more of their supply chain. Are we seeing that any of that spending is actually ramping up to show a better indicator of how the economy's doing?
Absolutely, Commissioner Sterrett. Our industry partners are driving that, I believe, more aggressively now than they even have before. So we've participated in a few projects. One of them I shared with you, I believe, in the January report. We were talking about the red wheat project between Rudenclaw Farm and Yamasa. So Yamasa is a soy sauce manufacturer in Salem. They've been getting all of their wheat from kind of national distributors, mostly coming out of Montana. And they said, you know what, we need more resiliency in our supply chain, which means we need to localize it. So they were encountering shipment issues when, there was a big snowstorm and they couldn't get their product here. And so in going through last year, many of our industry partners are saying, how can I make sure that I have my own continuity plan in place? And that is in great part localizing the supply chain. So SEDCOR is working very closely with our industry partners on B2B work. And that's one of the reasons we're actually executing the BRE survey right now, is because we want to make sure we're spending those efforts in the right places. I currently have 2 businesses that I am working to support who are trying to create a wine bottle recapture, wash, reuse sort of a system. Wine bottles are the biggest material, the number one material, I should say, that our wine industry partners would love to see made locally. My understanding is that due to sort of EPA and Oregon state regulations, the bottle making process is not very friendly for our state, or, we're probably just not going to see bottle making land here at least anytime soon. So how then do we be a little bit more innovative and assure that there is a local supply? And we see partners that are working to solve that problem. And you'll probably see some of these folks come before you in the next several months talking about looking for resources to make that happen.
Thank you. Commissioner Berschauer.
Thank you, Chair. Abishai, I was talking to Polk County about their effort for broadband expansion, and the initial survey was really key for them because it not only identified the needs, but also the rate at which people would engage and actually sign up and use the service. Because what we don't want is to have this sort of perpetually subsidized broadband service that the county or other people are going to have to keep going over time. So they were very specific in how they set that up, not only to identify the need, but also say, hey, okay, if we get this service to you, are you going to be able to pay the $99 a month or whatever that cost would be? So I think, I don't know what kind of survey work is being done other than the one you mentioned from Online Northwest. That one seems to be, if they're going to post it on their website, it seems to be a little bit more organic in terms of who's responding. But I would say that the county probably should be pretty involved in that as well, just so that we have a very aggressive sort of comprehensive effort to reach as many people as we can to identify where the needs are, what kind of needs, and then how many people are likely to participate just based on the cost to them.
Absolutely. I agree. And I appreciate you bringing up those examples of what's been happening around us. It's a really great learning opportunity for all of us, right? What are our neighbors doing? Also in Marion County, they took a similar approach. They actually had a survey done using advisors consultants called Magellan Advisors, and that work had already been underway for several years, much like Polk County, by the time they got to the point of having resources and trying to do some of this work. And we're just looking to start that, right, at that higher level of doing this deeper work. But one of the interesting things that they did as well was they used that data from their consultants as an opportunity to market to the service providers, to encourage them to come into communities where those service providers felt they might not have a very quick return on investment. Marion County then said, well, here's the data that we have from Magellan Advisors, and here's the plans, the community development plans for this community. They look to grow at this rate over this period of time. Is that more interesting to you? And found in most cases that it was. So they used that information as a way to create marketing for their communities. So I'm hearing you say too, creating the marketing for the users, the potential users. Here's what the rate of speed would be. Here's what the cost would be. Would you use this service? And also creating that marketing for the service providers, and doing both, right, I imagine would be even most effective. So I appreciate those comments, because that sort of very mindful, strategic, intentional approach bears the most fruit.
Thank you. And to that, Commissioner Bershauer, yeah, in Polk County, they actually mailed out surveys, and I don't know whether or not that's something that we mail out with our tax bills. I don't know if it's something we do in any other type of mailing, because that again could get expensive. But that was just one way, a direct mail piece to potential people who don't have service or have minimal service. So thank you for that. It seems like we're all trying to get little bits and pieces, and we have so much data we have yet to collect. So thanks for working on that.
Okay, well, if there are no other questions, I guess we can invite Tim Murphy into the room for the Project Oasis update.
Chair, sorry, I did have one question going back to the workforce challenges component, Abhishek.
Okay.
So Abhishek, you and I have talked a little bit about the potential of doing workforce retraining skills opportunities as part of the American Rescue Plan. Do you see, I'm just wondering whether like Willamette Workforce Partnership would be a good place to start, or whether it's something within the county with manufacturers. I know that there are some that are like they're already on it, and we could help them along. Do you have thoughts on kind of how we go forward with that?
That is a great question, and one that I would like to reserve answering in part until the end of the presentation, because I have some information to share from the EDAC. So they were thinking along those same lines, and actually have some recommendations which could come before the board once I get it all distilled. But just as a teaser, kind of one of those areas was the group felt that it was really important to incentivize industry to partner with the schools for workforce development. So youth workforce, right? Just one example. And that time, energy, and monies from the county would be best spent incentivizing industry partners to work with those programs. So they had some broad areas of focus. They also had some project ideas. And there were several really cool ones that they came up with. So yes, I think that is going to be an area for our industry partners that is 100%. It is top 3 all the time, right? So how do we do that better? And always it will be using our partners who are best suited to do that work, Willamette Workforce Partnership being one of them.
And to that, there has been a discussion. There is a proposal and a project underway, the Willamette Career Academy in Salem, which is taking over the Toys R Us facility. And they're asking for all of the school districts to have some kind of buy-in. And there's also been some discussion as far as whether the county would be interested. Reaching out to the various school districts, it seems that at this point, only Newburgh has expressed an interest in making a financial commitment, but the other school districts are certainly able to get involved with this because they're going to be pooling their resources in a huge facility. The only thing is the busing component, busing people, busing the kids to Salem. But in the West Valley, it seems they've really got a handle on this whole workforce development with the projects that they're doing. And I appreciate what the superintendent is doing out there, but they're working on ag science and welding and heavy equipment certification, so these kids can come out. So they really don't even need to be involved in this, but I think that this is one we can look at as we get further along.
I agree. And transportation is one of the biggest hurdles. Also, the rules at the school district level around how long a child can be outside of the school, like that travel time cuts into the learning time. So some things need to be sorted out. But it's has promise to be a real tool.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so I think Tim Murphy has joined us. Hi, Tim.
Tim, welcome.
Thank you for having me back, Chair, Commissioners, staff. Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to jump in and just first of all wanted to make sure I offer the background, right? So Commissioner Bershauer, I know that you were staying informed about these conversations last year, but I want to make sure everybody's just kind of reminded. What is this project? How did we get here? And then Tim will offer the updates on how we're moving forward. So again, we're really coming to you with updates. We wanted to make sure that the board feels informed about the project, about how the funds that you invested are being used, and about what future plans are. So as a reminder, Project Oasis started amidst the 2020 pandemic as a workforce support program at DCI in Newburgh. Upon learning about the reality of the childcare desert in Yamhill County and seeing the impacts on working families at DCI, the Spencer family decided to commit resources from their business and their family foundation to provide high quality, affordable childcare and wraparound services for families in Newburgh and the surrounding area. And they decided to take a two-phase approach to this project. Phase one being focused on childcare and distance learning support. And that's what we came before you all with last year. Phase two, which was inspired by the Gladstone Center for Children and Families, is that Family and Child Resource Center housing additional program partners that each meet a very specific need in our community. So phase one and phase two. That phase two would wrap the childcare into it. It would just expand, right, into also providing those other things. So we came before the board a couple of times in discussion about this project. And on October 8th, 2020, the board approved $400,000 in grant funds to Project Oasis to fund the childcare and distance learning program portions of this project, which included costs for computer equipment for distance learning, supplies and PPE, program outreach, and the creation of a subsidized or scholarship program for lower income working families. Just as a reminder, this funding did not cover capital expenses. Okay, funds were issued by the county in the last week of December of 2020, and these funds were deemed reimbursable through CARES Act funding. And I'm just looking to Ken and anybody else for nods or anything along the way if I need to stop. So the original timeline that we were targeting was an opening date of late winter, early spring of 2021. We also approached the city of Newburgh with funding request for 2 feasibility studies for the initially identified locations. And we refer to those often as the 1150 and 305 buildings, if you've heard these conversations. The studies were performed by Brick Architecture and completed in January and February, respectively, of this year. So that's just the background information. And now I'm going to turn it over to Tim for the update on just where the family's at, where the project is at, and how we're moving forward.
Thanks, Abisha. And again, thank you for having me back for this update. So just wanted to give a quick overview of our journey so far, as well as our promising and exciting new headings that we've identified. So at the onset of this, after coming in front of you guys, we thought we could quickly and easily transform some rentable space in Newburgh over to the child care center, which was going to kind of meet that need of speed to childcare solution that we were aiming for, not only for ourselves, but for the community at large. And we identified that 1150 building on Industrial Parkway as a very optimal place, largely by location. It was right at the end of the bypass, right as you kind of enter in off of 219. And it seemed like an optimal location. We had toured the building. It looked like it could house a large number of children, that meaning we could affect more positively. But Brick Architecture, being experts that they are, came in and helped us identify, the pros and cons of that space. Unfortunately, that space was just not going to work for a number of reasons. One of which was its proximity to 219 interrupted play areas and secondary exits. Plumbing, although it was a gym, had ample plumbing. There are requirements as to where plumbing is required within a building in retrospect to certain age groups. There was a need for more exits, at which point the building owner was not particularly interested in putting more holes in their building. And then there were parking requirements, traffic studies, street improvements, so on and so forth. And the list just went on to the point where we just said, okay, you know what, let's move forward with the secondary idea. Now, simultaneously to this, we had been invited to go see the Gladstone Center and get a private tour, and understand their journey and how they got there. And it's during that we learned, don't be scared that your vision of what you initially started out looking at may change and morph and adopt new lenses as you grow into this. So we met with them. They were very informative, and it really gave the family the opportunity to kind of walk through and experience what ultimately we want to create. And we were identified that if we are in fact going to make these investments, both private, public, and nonprofit dollars, let's bring those together in the most powerful way possible, in the most beautiful place we can. And we identified the family-owned property of 305 on Springbrook. It's right off, kind of right down the main corridor of town. It's 6 acres, 30,000 square feet, relatively untouched Newburgh area land. And what a wonderful place to think about the idea of children being able to, kind of run around, plenty of grass, have gardens, and so on and so forth. Understanding that we've identified that new space, we did have one caveat and issue, is that DCI is using it for its manufacturing. So we had we needed to transplant these, our employees to another space. And so began the journey of trying to find new space within Newburgh, that could host 100 people and 80 plus parking spaces for light industrial use. I think you guys probably, are already aware of the challenges that is. We looked, within Newburgh, we looked, in the surrounding areas, and even in the surrounding areas, for our type of manufacturing, it is a little bit difficult because while there is space, there's often like 5 parking spaces. So it just ends up it was a hard mix. So we recognize that in order for us to solve this solution, the family does in fact want to use the 305 as a legacy project and contribute it to this goal. But we need to develop to probably solve the solution of displacing the workforce. So that's kind of where we're at on that. But in order to solve the speed to childcare solution that we came in front of you with, we recognize that the front 7,900 square feet of the 305 location was administrative, and we could move that to administrative buildings along the Springbrook corridor. We found a location that we could do that with. With that, we Brick Architecture ran their feasibility study on that, what it's going to take, and the net was that it would cost $800,000 to outfit a 7,900 square foot remodel, interior remodel, nothing exterior, no major construction. We're talking about just replacing some walls and even keeping plumbing in the general vicinity of where it was, but moving showers to toilets and so on and so forth. That and loaded inside that 800,000 was about 27 to 32% of it being SDC and city charges. And this was, being unaware of the process, and we were unaware of how this internal remodel would trigger city development fees. And it just became a barrier of entry to us for a phase 1 at 305. We recognize that when we tackle phase 2, the larger kind of community resource center with childcare and wraparound services, and outfit the entire building as a complete project, those fees will become a more proportionate to the larger project. But within a 7,900 square foot remodel, it just didn't make sense to spend our dollars, your dollars, nonprofit dollars in that way. It would have just not made sense for us. So with that, we took a pause, and we had been in contact, and part of the advisory committee was the Newburgh School District, and they raised their hand and said, "What you're doing is good. We believe in it, and we think that we should continue pushing this forward. Every good project has to pivot at some point, and this was our time." So we looked towards to the Newburgh School District for a partnership. We were in the process of going through contracts in the coming weeks here. And they've identified 4 modular units that are sitting on campus of the Chehalem Valley Middle School. Abisha, if you want to pull up the plans, Brick Architecture was able to run how we could potentially utilize that space to the best of our abilities to create the most number of attendees. So the school district, Project Oasis, the Spencer Family Foundation, and Little Bird Childcare will be kind of coming together on this as discussed originally. And we would be able to outfit what we identified as 70 children, ranging from pre-K, wobbler, infant, toddler, kind of that area there. And as Abisha will probably talk about, the distant learning aspect, as every good plan of COVID did, there's always seems to be a bit of a change in need. So with schools restarting, distant learning may not be as much of a requirement by the time we open this up. What we're hoping, not hoping, but it's planned for prior to the school year starting again. So with that, we have more.
Sorry, Tim, can everyone see my screen? I'm not sure if you can see my screen sharing.
Yes, Abisha.
Okay, great.
So this sits right off the school, right off the parking lot. It's very easy, very from all operations and mechanics of a childcare. This outfits it very well. The school district is being very cooperative and a helpful partner in this to help us bring these up to speed. I think they were built in the 80s originally, so there's a little bit of work to do. The preference is that they are, to not interrupt anything that's going on during this the remainder of the school year. The construction preferences is over the summer, so we're kind of using this time to find the right contractors and put the bids out and so on and so forth. So that's kind of what.
And this plan also takes into consideration the licensing. So it's obviously, right, it's facility use as far as any sort of city or fire department code goes, but also childcare licensing, as well as that overlay of COVID requirements. So the way this facility is being built out to house this childcare project, you'll see many different sort of entry and exit points, shared hallways with different access points. And those were based off the COVID regulation that each room of a certain number of children had to have their own access. So there is this additional layer of COVID requirements that was getting built into this plan. It certainly created additional cost and additional moments for like pause and reflection, and are we doing this right? Did we capture them all? But also this facility would be well prepared to manage those requirements if we had a recurrence of a pandemic as such.
So with that, the capacity that we've identified is 70 children. We will probably open enrollment closer to 60, just to ensure that our two-dimensional estimates don't feel squishy and tight when you kind of get into a 3D world. And put people in those spaces. So we'll probably start out around 60. We're developing what the enrollment process would look like. We've been having conversations with Head Start and other nonprofits around the area to identify, what is the most appropriate way to capture the lower income working families. And then also ensure that we're not being redundant, that we are in fact, that our mission is capturing those that are somewhat lost in the system, and that our workforce development, again, mission is not lost or somehow compromised in this. DCI, especially in this, as and the family have identified that the lion's share of attendees will be community, and those who might be referred from Head Start, as those who just might overqualify from being able to utilize the Head Start resource. And then we will keep a very low amount for kind of reserved headcount for DCI. And really, just to pause on that, the idea here is that what we talked to you guys about in the beginning is we're trying to bring a new model together to solve childcare deficit, right? So bringing private and public and nonprofit together to solve a solution that otherwise hasn't organically happened by any one of those single entities easily. So the idea is like, okay, although we, DCI, we're okay forfeiting headcount in this, we want to, as a model, identify a way that we can say, okay, this worked here. Why did it work? Because private did in fact get something out of their investment, right? Like they were able to kind of reserve headcount in their investments, in their capacity. So we want to make sure that, while we're willing to forego, any great numbers of reservations of attendees and really open it up to the communities, that the model is being proven out here as kind of a test study.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Tim. And that's a good point, because it's a good reminder. That is one of the things that we shared with this group as we requested funding, was that we are creating a model document to share out with other communities about how these public-private partnerships can work. And also that we'll be identifying what were the hurdles that we encountered along the way. And part of what Tim is sharing with you are those hurdles that are barriers to childcare facilities opening, right? So these aren't just hurdles that this project is encountering. These are hurdles that our childcare service providers are encountering. And we need to be hearing these things and thinking about them and looking at how do we work to solve these issues. So Tim, were you done before I jump in and kind of close us off here?
Yes, I was done, unless there's any questions. But
yeah, we'll definitely get to the Q&A portion too. So I want to share with this group, I have learned so much about childcare that I never thought I would know. And, being a mother myself who utilized childcare, I thought I knew a lot more than I did, to be honest. So in summary, I wanted to make sure that everybody was aware that the location has been identified. Contracts are currently being secured with the school district. The project partners feel very blessed to have the school district so committed to this. Project Oasis is working closely with the school district to make sure that the distance learning needs, if they do change, are navigated and managed between the two, right? So now there's even a tighter partnership about that. And that was one thing that we discussed with the county when we went into this as well, is that by the time the facility opens, we could see many changes to the need that were driven by COVID. However, childcare, access to affordable, local, safe, legal childcare, high quality childcare, was what we were working to secure here. So what we planned to do as we made that pivot was the funds that we were originally planning on using for some of the computer purchase for distance learning that we're no longer investing in. We are using, Project Oasis is using those funds to deepen the scholarship program. So they are making, like as Tim mentioned, they had apportioned out a certain number of these spots for their own staff because this was a workforce development project. They have decreased that and are now making more spots available to the general public and creating a deeper, richer, longer, so deeper and longer scholarship program, utilizing partners such as Yamhill Head Start to help develop the programmatic pieces, making sure that they're capturing the right types of folks who need the help most so that we can get working families back to work. We know that that women have been disproportionately displaced from work, especially on a longer term basis for this issue. We also have been informed, again, this is my learning that I continue to have, that as minimum wage increases, that working families who make minimum wage, in these programs, support programs from the state are not keeping up with that. So they can actually, as minimum wage raises, even though that doesn't all of a sudden cause them to be able to afford childcare, they get dropped out of the state programs because now they make too much. So when Tim learned that, he really cued in quickly, and talking to Sui Lizimir, I'm going to say her name incorrectly, Sui, forgive me, about how we can help, how this program can help bridge the gap. She said, let's work together because our program has some requirements on it and we have to target this group, but this group who doesn't quite qualify, but they should, we want them to be working with your program. So we're seeing these really great relationships get formed. And also, Commissioner Sterrett, I wanted to share with you that Tim keeps bringing to me, hey, you know that resource facility that's coming to Newburgh that Commissioner Sterrett keeps talking about? We need to talk to those folks. We need to make sure we're working together and that we are providing what's needed without duplication. And if it's replication, let's make it sure it's on purpose, you know, that it's valuable and it's redundancy, intentional redundancy, not duplicated efforts, you know, dividing resources. So, so the project continues to move forward. They have timelines slated for construction, as Tim mentioned. They're looking to have the child care facility open before school starts again in September. And there's a timeline that if you're looking for more information can be shared. But based on that, so does the board have any questions or anything for Tim before we send him back to the dental industry?
I want to say thank you, Tim and the family and your company for the commitment that you've made, because it's not an easy project, as you found out. So thank you for that. And thank you for the sacrifice of limiting your access to spots there. But also a couple of things. I wanted to know if you've been working at all with the Relief Nursery, because this is I don't know if you're familiar with the Relief Nursery. You are familiar with them, because that is definitely a population that needs access to childcare once the Relief Nursery part has been transitioned out of.
Yes, we've been invited to join and kind of sit in with Jennifer Richter's Yamhill's Early Learning Hub, and that has been very eye-opening to just a wealth of people who are dedicated to this subject matter. Sui, along with the Relief Nursery and a number of programs and I'm still learning, so my curve is still, you know, kind of on the upward bound here. But I will tell you that particular Relief Nursery is a component of Gladstone that the family, you know, definitely enjoyed seeing was there. And it all ties into the workforce. You know, if things come up, right, and you need a solution to solve that. So that's definitely a component.
Excellent. And just real quickly, you mentioned the SDCs, which, you know, I'm always going to latch on to that concept when it comes to how we in government sometimes become impediments to the very things we say we want to fix. I know we've heard about some significant issues, and this is all anecdotal, about people who wanted to either open a daycare or move a daycare, and what the SDC charges were in McMinnville, which again, significant impediment to the thing we say we need for workforce and overall community. But in Newburgh, has there been an effort to try to say, hey, Newburgh, you want to, you know, cut us some slack on the SDCs. We're working on this program. What was their response, and was that question broached?
Abisha, do you want to cover that one?
Yeah, I'm taking a breath so that I choose my words, because I think it's important to. I think it's important to.
We're all taking a breath, Abisha. Don't
Yeah,
worry.
yeah, thank you.
This is why we pay you to do this work.
Better you than me to talk about this.
Yeah, so well, thank you for throwing that one out there, Commissioner Sterrett, but it's a really good, valuable conversation to be having. So I first want to start by saying that I believe in the intended use of SDCs, right? So the intended use of SDCs in many ways, and it's complicated, but kind of at its core is to pay for continued maintenance of streets and roads and sidewalks around schools and all of the things that we need in our communities for them to be livable, right? And attractive and safe. And so at its core, the intended use of SDCs are important, right? So I don't want to dismiss that. However a community approaches their SDC cost framework, there's a lot of contributing factors. And in the same breath that I can say that we know that the city of Newburgh's SDC charges are higher, let's say in comparison, I've heard Commissioner Berschauer, you also expressed this comparison to the city of McMinnville, right? Maybe they're higher. I have also heard Scott Hill, the mayor of McMinnville, suggest that one of the issues that they have in their budget at a city level, and that presses them against budget shortfalls, is the fact that their SDCs aren't high enough, that they haven't reassessed them in a long enough period of time. So I will say that, without going into the politics behind that, right? Because there's a lot of detail with each community. What I will say is that we have seen other communities, like out in Bend, who have said exactly what you're saying now, Commissioner Sterrett, that if we care about this, we will make decisions that might look like sacrifices in order to ensure that we have this for our community. They put an SDC moratorium out for childcare facilities. I believe it was for 12 months. So any child, and maybe that's been extended by now. I haven't looked at that recently, but they issued a moratorium on SDCs for childcare so that at least that wouldn't be the hurdle, right? That prevented the expansion of childcare facilities. These conversations were brought to the city of Newburgh. I wouldn't be able to explain to you fairly why they chose not to pursue that approach. I think somebody from the city would have to do that. But these conversations, recommendations, concepts were brought up by myself, by the project, and the family of DCI, and the team of Project Oasis has been very verbal with the city about the obstacle of the very high SDCs and other fees. And I think that in being as clear and honest, and also reserving judgment, that's where we're at. And I do hope that our community partners who have control and authority in these areas hear these concerns and try to be creative about how they can approach partnering with projects like this, whose sole intent is to provide benefit to the community.
That was very well said, Abisha. I know I wouldn't have even tried to say it as diplomatically as that. So thank you, and thank you, Tim.
And I do want to say that the city of Newburgh, from the mayor to the council to the city planning to the economic health manager, everyone was all hands on making 305 want to work, whatever capacities or struggles they have, to not be able to extend that hand in waiving, is beyond DCI and the project and the family, and it's not a hurdle that we're interested in getting involved with. But everyone was involved. They were responsive. They were appreciative of the project. We just found that wasn't the direction we could go with the path that was easiest, right? And it was just not cost effective. So we pivoted and we're finding a new way.
Thank you for doing that. Commissioner Kula, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tim. Even though I knew where you were going with your story, I must confess that it was filled with stress in my own head. Where are we going next? Is this going to work? Is there something? So thank you for being a good storyteller, and thank you for your persistence in seeing this through to the next stage. I really appreciate it. And Abisha is aware of this, but like we've all seen that when you work on a project that has lots of different people and lots of different organizations, things inevitably, there are obstacles to overcome. And you clearly know that from your business as well. I did want to, note too that we have encountered challenges even within the county. So in unincorporated Yamhill County with finding zoning and just the codes involved with siting childcare facilities. So while it's maybe feels easier to notice somebody else's challenges or insistence in certain areas, I do think that we as a board should probably have a conversation about how challenging it is to site childcare facilities in Yamhill County, unincorporated county as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Berschauer.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Tim and Abisha. I just wanted to clarify. So there's like a pod or row of modulars in between the elementary school and the middle school. Is that the site you're talking about? Okay.
Correct.
Okay. So there's quite a bit of recreational grounds around there. Was that part of the agreement that the kids would be able to use that area?
The discussion was that the older kids, barring the mechanics of timing with the grade school, the older kids might be able to use the playground that's over a little bit further away from the building, and right out the back of the facility, we would want to put a smaller kind of toddler wobbler playground where they'd be able to kind of open up the back doors of the modular, kind of let them go down a ramp or a stairwell to a safe little toddler, kind of something you'd more traditionally see outside of a Tinder care or something.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that's a great space. So
yeah,
congratulations.
I'm very excited about it. Yeah, we've learned a lot about development here. Brick has been just a terrific company to work with, and Commissioner Kula, I will say that yes, while there are obstacles in what we're doing, I commend all those that are in leadership positions in Yamhill and Newburgh and Dundee and Mac. Everyone has stepped forward to help us try and find solutions. I mean, we all create policy. Even here within DCI, we create policy that sometimes gets in our own way. But a lot of times, everyone's sober to those realities, and they're just trying to help you navigate around them in the best way possible.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Tim. We appreciate your work and your persistence.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for being with us today. All right, Abisha.
All right, we'll move on, and I will try to be very quick and concise. Bye, Tim, by the way. As we get through this next part, I know you have a full agenda. So the very last part of my update and what I'd like to propose it's essentially a proposal, is a process by which I can provide support in aiding you in developing county priorities. Again, with the American Rescue Act fund is in mind, and at the same time, these priorities help to guide the work that SEDCOR does in the county, and certainly helps to guide the work that your staff does as well. And I think often about Carrie Martin, as she and I partner on a lot of these projects to identify funding, right? So as we're looking at what opportunities are, it's always better to not chase money just because money is there, but to say this funding stream matches what we've already identified as a priority or a need. And that's what I'd like to see us try to work to get to. So I'm gonna share my screen with you again, because I did send you all out kind of as an information only at one point, this proposed work plan process. And I cleaned it up just a little bit, but it looks very similar to what I suggested earlier. So here's our, can you see my screen? Yes, okay, good. I have accidentally shared my Outlook inbox more times than I would like to admit. So, so here is what I have put together. It is a very simple plan, and it's intentionally simple because I'm looking for input. I also want to make sure that if you would like to take an approach that is structured, that we include any other plans of approaches that you already have in mind. If you'd like to combine those efforts and maybe make it more of a comprehensive approach. So if there's other areas of focus, this approach mostly focuses on economic recovery. So in order to set priorities, essentially this is, today, right? So county priorities discussion we're having right now, talking about a proposed approach. And what I was hoping to get from you is today, if you're interested in this approach, first of all, is a thumbs up that we want to do this. But secondly, if you do, is requests from you on what information you would want to have in order to feel best prepared to set areas of priority. And a good example of that might be the Oregon Business Innovation Plan, right? They just issued their 10-year innovation plan. There's really good information in there where essentially the state, utilizing paid talented consultants and advisory committees came up with, hey, these are the areas that we want to focus in regards to business innovation for the next 10 years. That's valuable information we could be looking at and saying, well, here's what the state is looking at. Do we agree with that? Maybe that could also be a priority. So I would look for, what information do you need? Do you want workforce information? Do you want industry trending information? Are you looking for community sort of development planning and visioning information? If we continue to move forward, then what we would do is take those requests and we would hopefully come back on April 22nd. This is an unscheduled time, so maybe this could change. And we would want to have a work session, right? In that work session, I would probably request the support of staff so that, and maybe that's Carrie Martin, maybe that's someone else. I always look to Ken, right? Who is that? But so basically we would come back before the board. I would have in advance provided you with the recommendations from the EDAC. So again, this is each of the communities are represented, our industry partners are represented. They went through a guided process. They came up with recommendations to propose to you for areas of focus. This is a great tool for you to use. You would have the EDAC recommendations. We would bring before you the list that the board put together last year for areas of priority that helped to give us some guidance. And then we would review any of that data that you received, any questions, and then have a work session. How do we start putting this into a list of priorities? Following that, the next round, we would come back, and this is where I would utilize that staff support. So we would take the information you provided in that session. We would come back and say, okay, here, we chart it out for you. Here are the identified areas of priority. And here are the projects that are already going on that are trying to meet those areas of priority. So if we know, for example, that YCAP is doing a housing program or project, and one of those areas of focus is affordable housing or addressing homelessness, right? We'll start to populate, here's what we already know is going on, so that you have a very, as comprehensive as we can get it in this period of time, list of the projects that are already trying to meet those. We would also at that point be able, hopefully, know more about the funding that's coming our way, be able to bring in front of you proposed approaches. So for example, we might come and say, we recommend another business grant program this year, and here's the types of business grants that we think we should be focusing on. So, and then the following June 24th meeting, that's already calendared. I'm just letting you know I'm coming before you again for a quarterly update. That could also be a time that we schedule more of this work or follow-ups, or maybe you identify projects that you want to move forward and we're talking about how to execute those. I'll also be sharing an update on the Online Northwest Rural Broadband Project. So I'll stop sharing. I know you've seen this before. Again, it's a simple outline. The intent is to provide support to the board in informing you, bringing before you proposals, data, and trying to help you develop those areas of focus. We have partners that are asking us for this. So the state has already come to us many times in different ways, asking us, what are your projects? What needs funding? What's already engineered? What are you thinking about? Because they're trying to figure out how to plan for their funding as well. Carrie and I are having this conversation on Friday with Wes from EDA because they're trying to do the same thing. He came to our regional economic development meeting and said, I need your projects. I need to know what you care about, what you're working on, what's already engineered, what's not. This is how we get ourselves in front of opportunity. So that said, I'd like to see if you have any questions, if you are interested in taking an approach like this.
Thank you, Abisha. Appreciate that. I wanted, before we get input from the other commissioners, Ken, does this sound like a timeline that we can work with, and knowing that we have perhaps some budget allocation issues that need to be addressed, if this is a good fit, if there's anything here that we would need to change the timing on?
I would say, based on our earlier discussion, that we have the work session scheduled for the 15th would probably be the best time, because, you know, and we may need to modify this timeline. And I'm also trying to, because I think on the 15th, what's really going to be important is we haven't had that 35,000 foot level discussion about kind of that overarching external, internal, the types of kind of that general discussion, because, you know, again, we're all pending. I think we have sufficient information to have that discussion. And I think that's going to be a driver, because I really see that the work that Abisha is proposing and discussing here with that economic recovery piece, I think that's one of what I call the multiple buckets that we have that we need. This is one of those, and there's a few others that we haven't even had a chance to discuss yet. And I think it's going to be really important from an organizational and how we move forward, because I mean, we have a daunting task ahead of us, because we have this funding that's coming, and we know there's a lot of need, and there's a lot of requests and a lot of ideas. And I think that's what really going to be important, is kind of get that policy direction on the 15th and have that discussion on what it looks like at the 35,000 foot level. And then we can start drilling down, and then maybe this timeline can be adjusted to a certain degree, or depending on what the board wants to do.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. Commissioners, does this seem like a reasonable timeline? Any questions for Abisha? All right. Yes?
Chair, we're having a race to see who's the slowest over here. I think I won just because I spoke first, but
Okay, yes.
I lost because
Do you have a question? Do you have a question, Commissioner?
Yeah. So I wonder about, thank you, Abisha, for sharing this. I think it's a good framework to start our discussions. And then thank you, Ken, for adding in, I guess, for lack of a better word, some of those internal kind of internal priorities, at least what I was hearing. And I've started to think about it as internal, external, and immediate and long term, as kind of, you know, there's, if we do 4 squares, right? Which is helpful to me. One thing I wonder about Abisha is whether there's whether like a real solid professionally done survey, or like town halls, where there's some kind of like real clear outreach to the community would be valuable as part of this.
That's a great question, Commissioner. I know I say that a lot, but it's because you all ask great questions. It's a great question because that is actually something that came out of, as I was reading through the notes real quick and participating myself in the EDAX process, was that they had a deep desire. So the community representatives, as well as the business partners, to be engaged by the board. They want that engagement. They want town hall meetings. They want small community conversations, whether that is done by way of a consultant, whether that is done by way of kind of organized activities at a county level, whatever's effective, right? I don't think that I didn't hear a preference there, but it was definitely requesting engagement. And so as SEDCOR is being approached by the state and the feds asking, what are the projects you have? Abisha, let's get something on the list. I have to submit to the governor by tomorrow, right? Phone calls I've recently had, my first reaction is to go back to the business partners, right? Or to use data already provided by the business partners to feed that. And that's because I focus on traded sector industry. And then when it's around community, right, we go directly to those community partners. So a short answer, I do believe in that approach. I believe it is the best approach. And if we're going to do that, it needs to be done well and thoughtfully so that it's not just the same voices at the table every time, that we're capturing the real input. I also wanted to respond to something Ken said. I have a great desire to be better coordinated with Ken and following the processes that he has to follow for kind of managing the financial piece. And part of why I'm bringing this in front of you is, and I've talked to Ken about this, we've kind of worked through this to make sure, hey, are we aligned? Am I thinking right? So that there aren't surprises coming at him like, oh, what, you want to host a grant program? Well, how do we do that, right? So that he can be working his process while I'm working mine, and it's understood and it's coordinated.
Okay, thank you, Abisha. I know that Chair Starrett has expressed concerns in the past about what you said a few moments ago, which was the same organizations and the same people knowing where to look and then missing others. So I just want to make sure that both with input about what priorities and concerns are in the community, but also with who has access and knows about programs, that we get it as widely shared as possible, because we do have more time with this.
Thank you. Commissioner Berschauer, did you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. I'm okay with the timeline. I think that on the 15th, it's really going to be important for the commissioners as a whole to sort of develop our framework of what we're looking for, because a lot of these groups that Abisha is talking about already sort of have that focus, but I think there needs to be an overlying framework that we talk about and discuss and come up with. Because I think for me, you know, the last grants that we did were very direct. They were for immediate recovery. But there was a lot of feedback that we were basically picking winners and losers, right? Because some people didn't show up on the list and others did. So I think with these dollars, since the amount is so significant, and for me, you know, this is my kids paying for this in the future. It's not me, right? It's going to be our kids who foot this bill for these economic recovery efforts. I would like to see something that is much more generational and has the biggest bang for our buck, and, you know, things that don't just necessarily, you know, benefit one business or one industry or, you know, something like that. So there's a lot of money to go around, but it's, I really think it's going to be important for us to set that overlying framework, because there are political implications to how we spend this money as well.
Ken, thank you, Commissioner. Go ahead. Thank you, Ken.
And to kind of build off of what Commissioner Berschauer was saying, some of the challenges that we had, and this is something to keep in mind as the commissioners when we go into the work session as well. When you looked at everything that happened in 2020 and the CARES Act had some pretty specific, you know, March to December 31st until on December 31st, then, the news came out on the day that of the deadline, they expanded that, oh, you have additional time. But at that point, the ship had already sailed. For this funding, and it's something to think about on how we both build this into the budgets and also how programs are rolled out. This doesn't have the same, it's trying to balance. It doesn't have the same timelines or the time crunch or the deadlines associated with CARES Act. But I do recognize, however, but there's this need component that also needs to come into play in how you prioritize and roll the funds out. So that is something that I believe, I don't have it right in front of me, but I believe the deadline to expend this new funding is December 31st of 2024. And, so that's something that we can talk about on the 15th as kind of an overarching policy or a strategy, is how the funds, how much of the funds do you want to make available now? How much in the next year? Are we going to look at a multi-year approach and how we build that and strategize that going forward?
Very good points. Thank you, Ken. Does anybody else have any more comments or questions for Abisha?
No, thank you, Chair. I really appreciate this as a starting point.
Abisha, anything else?
No, I appreciate this great conversation. And if there's thumbs up, I will plan to work with Ken on fine-tuning the timeline, making sure that these dates align with the dates he has planned, or that we align them, and then start working with him to get those events scheduled. So thank you for the conversation.
And thank you for your good work on our behalf. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Thank you, Abisha.
Have a good rest of your meeting.
Yes. Thank you. So does everybody want to maybe take a 5-minute break at this point, and then we can move on to our next discussion? We have reached the end of our work session, and we'll be moving on to a discussion of next steps for the Yamhellis West Sider Trail. It will undoubtedly be a rather protracted discussion, so maybe we should take a 5-minute break at this point. Everybody okay with that?
That sounds good, Chair.
Okay, thank you. We'll be right back. Maybe I'm gonna turn it. Okay, we will reconvene, and I want to thank Carrie for being at command and control and keeping us on the air, so to speak, and Carolina as well. These are not easy minutes to take, and so I appreciate that. And Carrie, thank you. So thank you, everybody, and we'll come back at the point of item number E2A, which is the review and discussion of next steps for the Amhelis West Sider Trail Bridge Project, master planning and grants, and this is continued from March 25th. So let's begin with a discussion of those next steps, what we know at this point, what we can discuss at this point, and then talk about the next item on this, which is a discussion of an audit. But let's go ahead and I think, Christian, maybe it would be good for us to come back at the point of what our next steps are going to be in relation to ODOT.
Yeah, so we had spoke briefly last week about engaging with ODOT about a repayment plan discussion about their request that we repay the Connect 6 grant funds. When we took a little bit closer look at the logistics, I don't think it's feasible for us to invite them to participate in an executive session, which is something that had been discussed last week. So at this point, I think our best bet is to ask them to give us their initial thoughts on what they're interested in seeing, a proposal on their thoughts in terms of a repayment. And then we can bring that back to the board, and then the board could have that conversation in open session if you wanted to do it that way, or we could have that conversation in executive session. It would really be up to the board to decide. We could also have part of the conversation in executive session if you wanted, and then bring it back to open session. And in asking ODOT for that initial proposal, we certainly could tailor it if there were specific items of interest or specific topics that the board wanted to ask them to consider or address. If we don't have any specific questions at this point and we're simply looking for their initial thoughts on how to proceed, then we can leave it open-ended, see what kind of a response we get. We can always pose additional questions back to them once we have a sense of where they are. So if the board's in agreement with that, we'll reach out to ODOT, see if we can get a response from them, and then hopefully have something more to talk about in that regard, hopefully as soon as next week.
Thank you, Christian. I'd like to make sure that as much of this as possible is done in open session. I think that's probably, I don't know, is everybody in agreement with that? I don't see that there's anything that should be an executive session. We know that ODOT didn't want to meet with us in open session, and I would like to make sure everything we do is at least with their information out in the open. Anybody have any comments at this time? Okay, so Commissioner Bershauer?
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to say, I think it's best if we allow ODOT to come up with a list of options, and then we kind of put ourselves in the position of responding to it. So I agree that should be the request, and then, we can discuss that in open session.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
So, and Christian, they are aware that what we're asking is for the sort of the greater universe of options, and not just a narrow, okay, we want this much back. We're looking for information from them on a number of different options, in addition to the financial part of this, what some of our options are as far as the trail goes or the corridor goes.
Okay.
Okay, great. All
Yeah,
right.
we will convey that.
Thank you very much. Okay,
Sure.
appreciate that. So we can move on to the next item, which is the discussion of an audit of the Connect 6 and State Parks grants with regard to the Amhelis West Sider Trail Bridge planning and construction of the Stag Hollow Bridge. Commissioner Bershauer, do you want to lead us off? I would imagine we've all had conversations with County Council about some of our thoughts and our administrator, but is there anything that you wanted to add in the initial?
Thank you, Chair. I'm still going through a lot of the information that was passed along to us and the responses from Dowell and Farline. There's some things in there that they're concerning to me, but like I said before, I'm not a forensic auditor, so it's very difficult for me to feel like we don't need an external audit, because I would like to have someone else looking at this saying, hey, this is what was charged, this is what was promised, this is what was in the original bid. I have a hard time believing that there weren't significant change orders that came through when we had the stays on the bridge, because that would not have been part of an original bid. That was not expected or anticipated. So there's a lot of questions still about what's coming through in some of this information. And so, my gut still tells me we need some sort of external audit.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Kula.
Thank you, Chair. Is there anything in particular that you can point to that you have concerns about and seem to not understand? And have staff not provided you with an explanation for those? Or is it simply that you don't feel comfortable with the answer?
Commissioner Kula, I don't have, my issue is that this money was spent, 1.25 or $0.25 million, and we have this bridge that is incomplete. I don't believe it's 50% complete, and I would actually like to get another opinion on that as well, officially, not just anecdotally when I've asked contractors here and there. But I think we haven't solved that problem for the public, that we have spent over $1 million and we still have this bridge that is incomplete. So dissecting all of the information that we're getting from Dowell and Farline is a long process, and I'm working through it, but it would be nice to have someone who has some context and has done this before and has gone through these types of public projects and can give us their opinion as well.
Okay, that's helpful for me to understand kind of where you're having challenges with it. I wonder whether it's something where we have staff around who build bridges. We have an engineering project manager in fact for the county. So if there's things specifically about how you have a hard time understanding the state of the bridge, and you're not comfortable with the answer that's given by Dowell and by the bridge builder that we've contracted with, perhaps we can figure out a way for the engineering project manager to talk with you. That would be, of course, through Ken, but that seems like an option.
One of the conversations that I've had along those lines, thank you, Commissioner Kula, is with our administrator and county council, is perhaps if we didn't have input from a public works engineer, for instance, on this, maybe not so much why not, but at this point it might be a little bit uncomfortable for somebody in public works to be making an assessment about a project that might come back with a determination that might not, let's say, not be flattering to how the work was done. Okay, so there's a conflict there. But I think it's a good place to start, where we either have somebody from Public Works who can go out and take a look at it, and then perhaps make a recommendation of an external independent engineer to just, short of a full-blown audit, take a look at it and say, was this bridge 10 days away from being completed? Because I think that the sort of stuck in everyone's craw is, was that really a correct assessment of the completion of the bridge? So what I would like to see is, let's just sort of take a look at that component where we have somebody say, yeah, I mean, we're looking at 10 days, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and that bridge would be complete, taking into account the stays. But if that is wildly divergent from what someone independently says, then I think we need to really look at some of the issues that Commissioner Berschauer is bringing up. Commissioner Cooley?
Thank you, Chair. So Ken, so there were a number of comments that were made or claims. Ken, is that what's Farline's estimate of how long it would take them from us giving them the go ahead to them having a completed bridge at this point, given all the back and forth and the clearing off of the site of equipment and such?
I don't have it right in front of me, but it was one of the documents that I had shared last week was their Farline's estimate that per direction of board we solicited, and we asked Farline to prepare. So that was in the packet that I sent to the each commissioner last week. I don't have it right in front of me, but that was the projection of mobilizing it back on the site and what it would look like to finish the entire bridge.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Do you, is there any reason to believe that Farline doesn't know what they're talking about? And would somebody else know more about what they're talking about than them?
I think like I presented last week is kind of going through the process. There hadn't been anything that was raising any red flags with the work that's proceeding, and our communications with Dal, as Dal being the contracted to manage this project, provide construction management services in addition to the design work, and keeping in mind that our solicitations and bids and the process that we went through and the contracts that we have in place, Dal and Farline are independent of one another. Farline was the low bidder for the bridge construction element, and then we have the contract with Dal to provide all the design work and then the construction management. And so Dal reviews all the invoices, does the work and reports, and gives us the reports on the construction that's occurring. And if that answered your question. And the other part that I kind of wanted to circle back to is I just wanted to let the board know that I do have a meeting with, based on the discussion that we were just having, I'm meeting with Mark Lago and Greg this afternoon to get some input and some thoughts, not necessarily to do an assessment, but to start that initial conversation and even possibly get some recommendations from them if they're not doing the assessment, or if we're not doing that, possibly a recommendation if the board is wanting us to engage with a third party in looking at the construction. So
I would like to start there. And I just want to go back to something. I want to make sure that we're all on the same page about the assessment of where the bridge was in terms of completion. We were told 10 days. Does that mean 10 days? I mean, because that's what we were told. So I kind of feel like a little confused as to what we're saying now. If it wasn't 10 days, was it 10 days after remobilization? Or we were led to believe that it was 10 days until the bridge could be completed. So now I want to make sure we're still saying that. Is there a qualifier to that now? And what was the difference between it being 10 days then? And I'm just a little confused. I want to make sure we're all on the same page here. And that would be a Ken question, right?
yes. Again, you know, with the estimate that was provided at that time, and I'm trying to think of the timing and when some further demobilization, I don't even know if that's a word, but I'm going to use it, but had occurred where, you know, because there were some additional materials that were taken off the site. You know, so again, the information that was conveyed is what was provided by the contractor at the time that the question was posed. You know, so again, we can look at that and look at that estimate, and then in comparison to what the estimate that we were now being provided on what it would take to complete the bridge in its entirety, and we can look at, you know, seeing if we can clarify and get some answers on that information.
Thank you. Commissioner Berschauer?
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at the far line cost and duration estimate in front of me, and it says the days to complete is 70 days. So there's quite a bit of difference between 70 days and 10 days. We're talking 2 months. So that needs to be fleshed out as to why that is such a large number. And even if you overlap the days, because they break it out into the tasks, even if you overlap, a single item would take 20 days. So we're already way past the 10-day mark. And I think that, you know, I kind of cringe a little bit when I think about having Mark Lago go out and basically critique or assess the work that another county department has done. That puts him in a pretty awkward position. So I'm not sure I'm on board with that. I think this needs to be somebody outside of the county for full transparency.
So if I might, this is what our departments do. They're not the contractors, and contractors aren't our departments. So we maintain a business relationship with contractors. That's how things work. Director Lago and Greg are not working for the contractor. There's not they work for us. So they provide us with the advice that we ask for and the knowledge about these things. So just to, in case there's any confusion, they're not working for contractors. They regularly oversee, that's why we call him an engineering project manager. He oversees projects. He's not working for the contractor.
Commissioner Kula, there is no ambiguity in that. I know who he works for. My problem is that if he comes back and says that this bridge is 70 days from being done, like the far line estimate indicates, then you're putting some of our staff members in a pretty interesting predicament given the critiques that have been discussed in previous BOC meetings. So I just think it puts him in a pretty bad place to have to do that. And frankly, for just full transparency to the public, it's kind of like, you know, the fox guarding the hen house here. Why we can't have other county departments necessarily critiquing other county departments. It doesn't promote transparency. That's why I've called for an external audit, because I think that it takes the accountability problem and puts it on somebody else.
So thank you, Commissioner. Ken, do you have a sense when I read the not invoice, but the proposal of work from Farline, I'm reading those as overlapping tasks. I mean, they're not going to go and do one thing and then leave for the day and then come back and do another thing. Do you have a sense of how many, what's the duration?
I think, you know,
because
I could just maybe take one
I just
step.
wanted to mention, I mean, those are person days, so that's part of it, right? Okay, sorry, go ahead.
And what I want to take one step back, and the only caveat that I want to be very clear when we're looking at questions around information that was provided about the estimate duration of the bridge as a comparison to the request for a proposal on what it would take to the bridge to be completed. The estimate that was provided on the 10 days, we did not have a detailed, we did not solicit a detailed proposal, a detailed written proposal. That was more of an informal question and answer. How much time do you think is had, is left on the bridge, versus give us a full proposal on what it would take to finish the bridge. And I know that can create some confusion, but I also know from a contractor, if you're looking at it from a contractor's point of view, that's giving a proposal, full written proposal, not to say that we're not going to hold them to the terms of the contract under the other contract, but I also think it's a little bit different. And I just want to be careful about comparing the two. Because I think the other one was more of an informal question, where the proposal that you have, the written proposal about finishing the bridge, was tell us exactly what it's going to cost. And there are some areas that I know that were built into that had to do with scheduling, making sure they project sufficient time to get the project done. There's the mobilization costs, there's the moving the materials back onto the site, and some other things there. I'm happy to, again, have the conversation and do a review. I just wanted to take one step back and on that. As far as getting into the details or the specifics on how they projected out the labor hours associated to the contract, I do think that there is some overlap with that, and then some timeline considerations that are also built in for, I can ask those specific questions. Carrie and I can circle back with Farline and ask some clarifying questions about the proposal that they submitted. Or the other part is, we could also, as part of my discussion with Greg and Mark, is just ask some general questions, not just, about, have them take a look at this. Mark and Greg, I haven't even had the in-depth conversation with them yet, and they have not been involved with this project. So, they haven't even seen the details of all the materials that have been proposed and exchanged or everything on this, because this has not been a public works project. So.
Yes, Commissioner Kula.
Thank you, Chair. Ken, thank you for that. Is there, so we're talking about a bridge contractor, bridge builder, and then I brought up, well, if we want to, essentially another set of eyes on it that we already have on staff, project engineer, public works director. Where does Dowell fit into this?
Well, Dal is our first contact at any time that there's been questions, and some of the information I've shared with the board, questions about Farline's invoices and items like that. We start with Dal because Dal is contracted to provide the construction management expertise. That's the reason we have that contract.
I wanted to just go back to that 10 days because it is a bit of a sticking point. Is where did that number come from? Did that come from Farline? Did that come from Dowell? Because I want to make sure that was not a duration that was used to in any way, influence the board's decision on what the disposition of the bridge would be. Well, it's only 10 days away from being finished, so really, you guys, we're in the home stretch here, and we need to carry it across the finish line. So where did that come from? Was it Dowell or Farline? Christian?
Yeah, so I went and looked at the emails that I have. Ken may have some other ones that I wasn't originally copied on. It looks like that estimate was an approximate estimate that came from Farline.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that's good to know. All right. So that being said, Commissioner Burchell.
Thank you, Chair. If that estimate came from Farland, then it's even more concerning to me that now we're being told it's going to be 70 days to complete the bridge and $155,000. So this is kind of gets back to my point, is who is conducting the accountability piece, right? You can't have Farline or Dowell, you know, basically saying, well, we did everything right, and the county saying, well, we just depend on them. I mean, there was a couple of things that were noted in these invoices that said that Farline was instructed to bill out the rest of their contract, even though they hadn't performed the work. So this is my point, is there's no accountability for what has happened so far. And frankly, I'm not going to trust the contractors to come forward and say, oops, we screwed up. That's not how this works. So again, we can take a little bit more time to process or you know, work through some of these issues, but I maintain to this day, even though I've seen some of this information, that we need an external audit done.
Sorry, Chair, I think you said you called on me. Yeah, okay. Can we get a sense from Farline of, because I know that when they were shut down by LUBA, they were on site building a bridge, and they expressed 10 days of continued construction time with being on site. Can we get a sense now of once they're back on the site, because that would be equivalent, right? Equivalent to where they were. Can we get a sense of from Farline about how many days once they're on site to completion of the bridge relative to the 10 days? Because that's what we would be comparing, is on site doing the work.
We can get that clarified.
Okay, thank you. So at this point, we're going to at least have our engineer and public works director just make an initial, or perhaps Ken will have a discussion on making some initial assessments, and that will give us more information, and then maybe recommendations from them, so that we have answered that question about transparency and not necessarily being in a position to have to criticize any other staff. So I don't know. I think that's a good place to start. And based on that information, I think that can tell us more going forward. Does anybody have anything to add to that, or does that seem like a reasonable next step? Commissioner Bershauer?
Thank you, Chair. I don't think it's putting him in a great position, so I don't support that. But if the majority of the board does, then that's fine. But I'd like to revisit this again next Thursday.
Thank you. And I expressed that to Ken, that this might put them, both of these staff, in a difficult position as far as what do you do, what do you say if something might not be complementary to an assessment that was already done. So I agree that might be a difficult position to put them in. So I hear you on that one. That was my initial concern, but I do believe that since we have this resource available, it won't hurt, and perhaps we can get recommendations for them as far as external engineers to make another assessment where we're not necessarily going into a full-blown audit. Not saying that there isn't legitimacy to those questions that you brought up. I think they are, and they're significant, but I think we should start here. Commissioner Kula?
Thank you, Chair. And I want to reiterate that our staff, they provide us with their counsel and their guidance on a regular basis, regardless of whether it's critical or not. I mean, that's really part of the value of having staff, especially experts in their areas. I do want to make sure that since we have a contracted project manager, this engineering firm of Dowell, that they are involved in this as well. I think that, having, if we're going to have Director Lago go out, which I just want to note, we need to figure out the fiscal part of that, since this is not work that's being done in the right of way. if we're going to have them go out, I think it would be helpful for them to coordinate with the existing contracted project manager.
Well, I think that might defeat the purpose, because if we're asking our staff, putting them in a very uncomfortable position given to go out and take a look at a project that might in some way come back to be critical of decisions that we've made, then getting the project manager involved pretty much defeats the purpose, because it isn't any longer independent. We have Dowell. We know what they've told us and we know what they've done. We're trying to get a different set of eyes with an independent assessment, not necessarily, hey, what do you think about this? No, this is irrespective of what Dowell has said, irrespective of what Farline has said. This is perhaps the most independent look at this with different eyes that we've ever had. Commissioner Kula?
So Chair, just to clarify, anybody who does an audit, does an inspection is going to be working with Dowell. I just want to be really clear about that. Our director, if they go out to look at a project, he's not an engineer, he's not a bridge builder, and he's not a design engineer for bridges. He's going to need the folks who have been working on the project. And likewise, any forensic auditor or external source besides Dowell and Farlane is going to need to be working with them as well.
So I would like to be clear about the reason why we're asking additional people to take a look at this, because we do have an engineer on staff who's quite conversant with bridge building, and going out and taking a look at the state of completion will give us information that the rest of us don't have, because we're not conversant with bridge building. So while we're not looking for anything on the order of an audit, what we are looking for is someone to come back to us who is an engineer and says, yes, this bridge is 10 days away. This bridge is 7 days away, 70 days away. This bridge is 6 months away. And that's the initial piece that seems to have been the sticking point here. And that's really all we're asking.
Okay, thank you, Chair, for clarifying that. I just want to make sure that they at least have the documents in front of them, design, invoices, proposals, that kind of thing.
And those things will be provided, as our administrator has pointed out. He'll bring them up to speed on what we're asking them to do. And it doesn't have to be a long, involved process, other than more of an area of expertise than any of us can bring to it.
That sounds good. None of us are bridge builders. And I like to remind us of that all the time. Thank you.
Not a one of us. Commissioner Berschauer.
Thank you, Chair. Kind of to piggyback on that issue of visiting the site and having Mark and others go out there. I received an email with some complaints and concerns about access and the impact to the bus barn and in mid-Columbia and how they're operating now that school's sort of coming back into gear. They're pretty busy again and they're having to run more shifts. So how is that going to be handled? Because I want to make sure that if there are site visits to the bridge, that we are being respectful of how we're accessing the property.
Ken, thank you, Commissioner.
I'll just say that it'll be handled. I believe I copied all the commissioners in the response to Mr. Belt's complaint that he sent, which is the first complaint that I've received that I'm aware of that's been submitted to staff. Again, we closely coordinated with Mid-Columbia, with the manager there, anytime that we were on site coming and going, and gave advance notice that, and tried to work with the bus company, because we do recognize that they have security concerns because of with the school buses being parked there, and also trying to, minimize, our disruption to their services that they're providing. And that was something that we worked really diligently to maintain those communications. And I saw that was the first time that I had, like I said in the email, that was the first time that Mr. Belt had contacted us with those complaints. And as far as our review of it, we've been communicating with the bus company throughout the project, even in the design elements leading up to that, when we had to put in the access gate, when we had to do the geotechnical drilling, when there was a lot of design work, and even with some of, you know, the weed clearing where we had crews that were having to do vegetation removal there. Those communications and coordination were happening. And any other further access will continue to do so. We'll continue to make sure that we're doing it at a time that minimizes, you know, we're in a different situation, you know, with more in-person school starting and more bus services, you know, so making sure that we're communicating with that. And if they tell us now's not a good time because we're going to have a lot of school buses coming and going, to, you know, we avoid those times and we work with them to make sure that we're not interfering with that.
Thank you, Ken. Commissioner Bershauer?
Sorry, Chair, I just have a follow-up. So I think that in Mr. Belt's email, it was, he stated that there was communication, but that the communication had deteriorated, especially towards the beginning of this year, so much so that when Farline was accessing the property, that they were leaving gates open and things were being stolen, and it put them in a position to have to lock the gates, which is a pretty significant move. And I drove by the property last Friday, and I noted that the porta potty that apparently belongs to Farline, but we're paying for, is still there. And it's not just still there, but it's actually like located right between two buses. It's pretty untenable where it's located. So it seems to me like we need to be actively mitigating some of these issues because that operation is very critical to our school district. So I want to make sure that some of these issues get solved. And if it's a reasonable request of the Belt family that, you know, Farline or the county reach out and say, hey, we're going to be there, you know, a week from Tuesday, that we're better coordinating so that it's not just, you know, folks showing up in the middle of operations.
We'll follow up on the portable restroom. It was my understanding that that was already, because we've already had communications with Farline, and that was supposed to come out. And so we'll follow up on that. As far as leaving gates unlocked and thefts and things like that, to my knowledge, I don't know in what conclusion was met that it was Farline that potentially left gates open or locks. I mean, that was information that was brought to our attention. And, you know, and like I said, also in the response, we're still reviewing all the elements. I mean, we just got it yesterday, his email. So I'm still looking into that. And as far, I'm struggling with some of the elements that were in that complaint, because I mean, it's, we'll talk to Farline and we'll get the portable restroom addressed. And I understand that they made some changes with locks or things. That was news to me. But again, I also didn't have anything outside of, I know it was alleged that Farline left, but I don't know if that was Farline that had done that. So again, we're still looking into this.
Okay, thank you. All right, does anybody else have any comments or suggestions at this point, or we can move on?
Chair, I just wanted to add that I know that Christian has been diligently working on renewing or contract lease negotiations with Mr. Belt. And I just want to put out there that we really should think about contracting directly with the bus company. And that's a conversation for another day. But right now we are funding somebody's own income rather than just directly contracting with the bus company. And I know that this is a longer conversation, but I wanted to make sure that it's out there.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Bershauer.
Thank you, Chair. It's my understanding that the Belt family owns every single one of those buildings on that property. Is that not the case?
So the terms of the lease are such that at the end of the lease, the tenant can either remove those buildings and take them with them. If they don't, title to those buildings transfers back to the owner of the dirt, which is the county.
And when does the lease end?
One of the leases has expired, and one of them is a year-to-year lease that's still ongoing.
Okay, so that one's been renewed and
Hasn't been renewed yet because we've been attempting to negotiate a new lease with the Belts and so far have been unsuccessful. They've expressed interest, I know, to lease Commissioner Sterrett, and maybe they've reached out to other commissioners about an interest in purchasing that property, if that's a possibility. But there is still some, there's a number of issues to still be resolved. One of them is how to handle the improvements, which they inherited, for lack of a better word, when they took the property over. But the terms of the lease that was assigned to us by UP, and I've pointed this out to Mr. Belt, and I'm happy to share that same email with you all, that upon expiration or termination of the lease, if they don't take the improvements with them, title to those improvements transfers back to the county.
That's pretty shocking, and I think that would be pretty shocking for the Belt family to learn.
It's not that unusual for a ground lease of that type for the duration of the lease. The idea being, by the end of the lease, the tenant, who in most cases has constructed the improvements and utilized them, has gotten the return on their investment during the duration of the lease. For example, ground leases for commercial developments will often be for 50 or 60 or 75 years, so that the developer has an opportunity to, factor the cost and the upkeep and the maintenance of those developments into the overall life of the project. Then when the project ends, oftentimes they will walk away. The Belts have inherited those buildings, well, I don't know, 20, 30, maybe even as long as 40 years ago. So again, that is a complication, and I would agree with you that there's more to discuss with them. I've asked Mr. Belt for information on how they came into possession and ownership of those improvements and what they've invested. And as yet, I haven't received any additional information from him. We're getting a little bit into the more details of this conversation, as Commissioner Kula mentioned, but it is an important conversation. I think it's one that we should try to work on getting on the schedule so the board could have a more detailed conversation and at least make some initial determinations about if we're interested in trying to continue on continuation on the lease, what the terms of that lease are going to look like, or if there's interest in leasing the property to someone else. We can have that conversation, and at what rate. So yeah, I think there's some important issues here that remain to be addressed. One
quick question, Christian, how long was the term of that lease that is now expiring and the one that expired?
They were these were 20-year leases, but I believe they've been on the property. There was a prior lease that they had with the railroad that was then replaced by these current 20-year leases.
And the terms of that lease made it clear, and I guess, or is it just more of a thing that the law says that the improvements then belong to the property?
No, the leases themselves say that the improvements will, title to the improvements will revert to the owner.
Okay, but they're buildings, so it's not like you can pick up and move the buildings. So as far as, so they were aware of that being a part of the agreement and the lease, because it was a land lease.
Whether they were aware of it or not, I can't speak to that. It was certainly a term and is a term in both of the leases. It's a little bit confusing. We have two leases. One is for a center strip down the middle of the bus barn, so for the sort of the corridor itself. The other lease is for the adjacent property on either side of the corridor. Those two leases together comprise the entirety of the bus, what we refer to as the bus barn property.
Chair, if I may, can I get a copy of that? I would like to
Sure.
see that clause, because it's my understanding that there are some other pieces to that would trigger where the buildings would come back to the landlord. So I'm not super clear on that.
Yeah.
But it's also, there was an email that came through, I think from Mr. Higgins, that referenced that they purchased these buildings from the Zimmerman family, I think, or something like that. So there was a transaction that occurred there, apparently at some point, where they purchased real property in the form of buildings. So I think we obviously need to have more discussion, but I'm sort of concerned about how this is playing out.
Commissioner, you're speaking my language, because I've asked those questions repeatedly of Mr. Bell. If they could please provide us with any of the documentation around how they came into ownership of the buildings, how those buildings were transferred. And again, as I said, as yet, I haven't received any additional information or details of those transactions from the Belts. I'm hoping to receive that. I can certainly make copies of the leases available, and I'm happy to talk about any questions you have after you've had a chance to review them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Kula.
Oh, yes, thank you. And I've never actually seen the lease. Maybe I've had it attached, so I would love to see that as well. And I believe that Todd just forwarded some notes, some additional comments, kind of the financial stuff on the bus barn lease. So just take a look for that.
Okay, I haven't received those. You received an email from Todd, Commissioner Kula?
Here, let me check and I can forward it on.
Yeah, I think that was in response to some specific questions that Commissioner Kula had asked about Mr. Belt's email yesterday.
That's right. Thank you very much. Yeah, I did ask Christian an email, and or I did ask Christian a question, and that's the response from Todd. Yeah.
Okay, so I think it would be that the lease is going to tell us a lot, is going to tell us whether or not the improvements were ever to become part of the real estate there. So that lease is going to be going to be key. Okay, so let's say that this is important for us to address as a single standalone issue, and get that information, and then come back and have this discussion. So thank you, Christian, for that, and thank you everybody for your questions. So at this time, that would be the end of our work session, unless I'm missing something else in that segment. If not, I'll move on to the consent agenda and a motion to approve.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented, Chair.
Motion to approve the consent agenda. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes. On to old business. Item H, the consideration of the adoption of written findings and conditions for docket C-2220 SDR 2620, which is an application for conditional use and site design review for a wine production facility, a winery, and by appointment tasting room. It's tax lot number 3321-913, and the address is 10275 Northeast Warden Hill Road in Dundee. The applicant is Jared Etzel. The owner is Etzel and Lubunsky LLC, and the appellant was Elizabeth Seeberger. And I believe Todd is here, and whether or not we need to just adopt those findings, or if there's any further discussion about those. If there isn't, I'll entertain a motion to approve the findings.
I move that we approve item H1, Chair.
We have a motion to approve the findings. Thank you, Todd, for coming up with those. H1, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. On to item H2, which is consideration of adoption and the second reading of the Yamhill County Second Amendment Sanctuary Ordinance, continued from March 18th, 2021. Commissioner Berschauer.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the second reading of the ordinance. In the first reading, we had a couple of just minor technical edits that Christian has fixed. So I would request that we read the document in its entirety, just for clarity.
All right, Commissioner.
Proceed. Christian, you're okay with that?
Yeah. So at this point, we'll call for the second reading of the Second Amendment Sanctuary Ordinance.
In the Board of Commissioners of the State of Oregon for the County of Yamhill, sitting for the transaction of county business in the matter of declaring a Second Amendment sanctuary in Yamhill County. The Board of Commissioners of Yamhill County, Oregon, also known as the Board, sat for the transaction of county business in combined informal formal session on April 1st, 2021 at 10:00 a.m. in a virtual meeting via Zoom. Commissioners Mary Starrett, Lindsay Burschauer, Casey Kula being present. The duly elected Board of County Commissioners of Yamhill County, Oregon find and declare, whereas acting through the United States Constitution, the people created government to be their agent in the exercise of a few defined powers, while reserving the citizens' right to decide on matters which concern their lives, liberties, and properties in the ordinary course of affairs. Whereas the Second Amendment of the Constitution of the United States of America states, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Whereas the rights of the people to keep and bear arms are further protected from infringement by state and local governments under the 9th and 10th Amendments to the Constitution of the United States of America, as well as Article 1 of the Constitution of the Great State of Oregon. Whereas Article 1, Section 27 of the Constitution of the Great State of Oregon states, the people shall have the right to bear arms for the defense of themselves and the state, but the military shall be kept in strict subordination to the civil power. Whereas Article 1, Section 33 of the Constitution of the Great State of Oregon states, this enumeration of rights and privileges shall not be construed to impair or deny others retained by the people. Whereas the Supreme Court of the United States of America in District of Columbia versus Heller upheld the individual rights to bear arms as protected by the Second Amendment of the Constitution of the United States of America. Justice Scalia's opinion stated that the Second Amendment protects an individual's right to possess a firearm unconnected with service in a militia, and to use that firearm for traditionally lawful purposes such as self-defense within the home. Whereas Justice Thomas M. Cooley in the People versus Hurlbut, 24 Michigan 44, page 108, 1871, surmises, the state may mold local institutions according to its views of policy or expediency, but local government is matter of absolute right, and the state cannot take it away. Whereas the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States of America, Section 1 states, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Whereas there is a right to be free from the commandeering hand of government that has been most notably recognized by the United States Supreme Court in Prince versus the United States. The court held, the federal government may neither issue directives requiring the states to address particular problems, nor command the state's officers or those of their political subdivisions to administer or enforce a federal regulatory program. Whereas it should be self-evident from the compounding evidence that the right to keep and bear arms is a fundamental individual right that shall not be infringed, and all local, state, and federal acts, laws, orders, rules, or regulations regarding firearms, firearms accessories, and ammunition are a violation of the Second Amendment. Whereas Yamhill County asserts its legal authority to refuse to cooperate with state and federal firearm laws that violate those rights and to proclaim a Second Amendment sanctuary for law-abiding citizens in their cities and counties. Whereas, therefore, through the enactment of this ordinance, Yamhill County, Oregon is hereby a Second Amendment sanctuary county. Now, therefore, the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners ordains as follows. Section 1, Prohibition. 1.01. No agent, employee, or official of Yamhill County, a political subdivision of the state of Oregon, while acting in their official capacity, shall A, knowingly and willingly participate in any way in the enforcement of any extraterritorial act as defined in Section 2, or B, utilize any county assets, county funds, or funds allocated by any entity to the county, in whole or in part, to engage in any activity that violates this ordinance by aiding in the enforcement or investigation of extraterritorial acts relating to personal firearms, firearm accessories, or ammunition. Section 2, penalties. 2.01. All local, state, and federal acts, laws, rules, or regulations originating from jurisdictions outside of Yamhill County, which restrict or affect an individual person's general right to keep and bear arms, including firearms, firearm accessories, or ammunition, are, for all purposes under this ordinance, defined as extraterritorial acts. Such extraterritorial acts are specifically rejected by this county and shall not be enforced by Yamhill County agents, employees, or officers, and shall be treated as if they are null, void, and of no effect in Yamhill County, Oregon. Extraterritorial acts for which enforcement is prohibited by Section 1 include A, any tax, levy, fee, or stamp imposed on firearms, firearm accessories, or ammunition not common to all other goods and services on the purchase or ownership of those items by citizens, and B, any registering or tracking of firearms, firearm accessories, or ammunition, and C, any registering or tracking of the owners of firearms, firearm accessories, or ammunition, and D, any registration and background check requirements on firearms, firearm accessories, or ammunition for citizens, and E, any extraterritorial act forbidding the possession, ownership, or use or transfer of any type of firearm, firearm accessory, or ammunition by citizens of the legal age of 18 and over, and F, any extraterritorial act ordering the confiscation of firearms, firearm accessories, or ammunition from citizens, and G, any prohibitions, regulations, and or restrictions, use restrictions related to ownership of non-fully automatic firearms, including but not limited to semi-automatic firearms, including semi-automatic firearms that have the appearance or features similar to fully automatic firearms and or military assault style firearms by citizens. And H, any prohibition, regulations, and or use restrictions limiting hand grips, stocks, flash suppressors, bayonet mounts, magazine capacity, clip capacity, internal capacity, or types of ammunition available for sale, possession, or use by citizens. And I, any restrictions prohibiting the possession of an open carry or concealed carry or the transport of lawfully acquired firearms or ammunition by adult citizens or minors supervised by adults. Section 2.02. Any agent, employee, or official of Yamhill County accused to be in violation of this ordinance may be made a defendant in a civil proceeding pursuant to ORS 203.065. Section 2.03. Fines recovered under ORS 203.030 to 203.075 shall be paid to the clerk of the court in which recovery is had, after first deducting court costs in the proceedings. The clerk shall pay the remainder to the treasurer of the county for the general fund of the county pursuant to ORS 203.065. Section 2.04. A violation of this ordinance is a Class A violation per ORS 203.065 with a maximum fine of $2,000 for an individual and $4,000 for a corporation per ORS 153.018. Section 2.05. Any peace officer as defined by ORS 161.015 may enforce this ordinance adopted under ORS 203.035. Section 2.06, exceptions to Section 1. A, the protections provided in Yamhill County by Section 1.01 of this ordinance do not apply to persons who have been convicted of felony crimes. B, this ordinance is not intended to prohibit or affect in any way the prosecution of any crime for which the use of or possession of a firearm is an aggravating factor or enhancement to an otherwise independent crime. C, this ordinance does not permit or otherwise allow the possession of firearms in state or federal buildings or courthouses. D, this ordinance does not prohibit Yamhill County, its employees, officials, and agents from enforcing local, federal, or state firearm acts, laws, rules, or regulations in effect as of February of 2021. E, actions in compliance with a court judgment or court order based on any extraterritorial act in effect as of February of 2021 are exempt from this ordinance. F, this ordinance does not prohibit Yamhill County from enacting any other legislation to govern its own residents and exclusively and only applies to county officials, employees, and agents whose role and duties are primarily, if not wholly, a county concern. G, this ordinance does not apply to nor prohibit the enforcement of local firearms regulations, which have been enacted by the voters of Yamhill County. H, this ordinance does not apply to nor prohibit enforcement of firearms regulations in effect as of February of 2021, pursuant to the directives of written administrative decisions or written policies of the county sheriff or the district attorney, and the sheriff and district attorney retain all prosecutorial, enforcement, or administrative discretion and authority that the sheriff or district attorney would otherwise have under federal, state, or local laws after February 2021, so long as said discretion and authority is exercised consistent with the legislative directives of this ordinance. Sorry, it looks like I'm missing Section 3, private cause of action. Section 3.01, any official agent or employee of Yamhill County who knowingly violates this ordinance shall be liable to the injured party in an action at law, suit in equity, or other proper proceeding for redress. 3.02, in such actions, the court shall award the prevailing party other than the government of Yamhill County, Oregon, or any political subdivision of the county reasonable attorney fees and costs. 3.03, neither sovereign nor governmental immunity shall be an affirmative defense of agent, employee, or official of Yamhill County in cases pursuant to sections 2 or 3 of this ordinance. Section 4, severability. 4.01, the provisions of this ordinance are hereby declared to be severable, and if any provision of this ordinance or the application of such provision to any person or circumstance is declared invalid for any reason, such declaration shall not affect the validity of the remaining portions of the ordinance. Section 5, effective date. 5.01, the first reading of this ordinance was made on March 18th of 2021. The second reading of this ordinance was made on April 1st of 2021. This ordinance is effective on June 30th of 2021.
Thank you, Commissioner. So at this time, we need a motion to adopt the Second Amendment sanctuary ordinance, and I will make that motion. Any further discussion? All right, we have a motion to approve and adopt the resolution. I think none too soon when you take a look at what's coming out of our legislature in Salem and some pretty onerous anti-Second Amendment bills and what's on tap coming out of Washington, D.C. So something for us to take a look at. Motion to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign, please.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion passes. Thank you. We'll move on to item I, which is other business, consideration of a letter of support to submit an application for the 2021-23 Youth Development Division Juvenile Crime Prevention State Grant Funds to support the Yamhill County Peer Court Diversion Program. Do we have a motion to approve?
I would move that we approve, Chair. And I apologize, I needed to switch back to it, but you know which item it is.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you, Commissioner. We have a motion to approve. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes. On to item 2, which is consideration of adopting a resolution recognizing April as Child Abuse Prevention and Awareness Month. And Christian, do we need to read that resolution? Okay, not.
Christian, you were muted.
All right.
So, yeah, historically, that has been the way the board has handled these resolutions, is reading them in their entirety into the record.
Okay, we have a Diane joining us, and I'm not. Hi,
Oh.
Diane.
Hi, Chair Mary. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Sorry I didn't have my last name on there. Diane Longacre, for the record.
Juliet's house.
Yes. So do we read the resolution first, or do I share a little information with you first? What's the process?
Well, go ahead, Ken.
Actually, Diane, you could share some information. The reading of the resolution and the action taken is something that the board does. So you can give some background to this and share information with the board.
Terrific. Thank you. Okay. Well, first I would like to say good afternoon, because it is afternoon at this point. And thank you, Chair, Commissioners, and Ken and Christian for having us today, or me today. Each April, we participate in National Child Abuse Prevention Month, and we appreciate that you feel that making the health and safety of children a priority is important. So thank you for that. As I'm sure you all know, and I did write this down, you guys, so that I don't take up too much time. As I'm sure you all know, untreated trauma from childhood abuse can have detrimental effects lasting a lifetime. Some evidence we see in youth and adults with untreated trauma can look like drug addiction, homelessness, criminal behavior, and mental illness. To really ensure we have a healthy community, and by that I mean a community where intervention takes a key role in making sure that those 1 in 4 children who are abused have the tools, the structure, and the opportunity for success in adulthood. And a community where prevention is prominent, so that maybe we won't see those 1 in 4 kids being abused, that they won't have that trauma in the first place. We have a full month planned at Juliet's house with signs, posters, ribbons, and pinwheels that you'll see in each city. Virtual Stewards of Children workshops will be available to help everyone become an ally for sexual abuse prevention. We will be holding the Safe Kids Fair on the 17th and encourage the community to wear blue on April 21st and come out to one of our prevention rallies. And we hope that you will join us when we wrap up the month on April 30th with our Celebrate the Children live virtual fundraising event. There we go.
Thank you, Diane. I'm going to ask you to read the resolution since I'm having a hard time getting it on my screen. So would you?
Thank you, Chair, because I was scrolling through trying to get it at that moment.
Okay, thank you, Diane. Would you read that
Chair.
for us?
Chair, I think Ken said that one of us has to read it. Maybe not, but.
Well, typically that's what we've been doing, but I'm having an issue getting that. So unless you have it in front of you, do you have it in front of you, Commissioner Berschauer?
I can have it shortly. It doesn't matter. I'm just trying to clarify that we're following the rules.
Yeah, and I can pull it up too. I'm scrolling through the 900 or the 90 pages.
Yeah, and that's why I'm having a hard time getting that. So by the time we find that, it might be more time, make more sense for Diane to go ahead and hold on one moment.
And Chair, I've got it now.
All right, so Carrie's going to go ahead and share the screen because apparently Diane doesn't have the version that we have. Okay. And we're going to go ahead. Thank you, Carrie, for that. She's on top of it. So we'll wait for that the version that we have, and Carrie will share her screen, and then we can have read that resolution. And thank you, Diane. Appreciate the work at Juliet's house. We know that unfortunately during the last year, we've seen an uptick in child abuse, child neglect, some of the issues that have been going on as a result of the COVID restrictions. And we're concerned about our kids. All right, so I think that might be a little too small, but I will give it a shot. Okay, now I can read it. Thank you, Carrie, for that. In the Board of Commissioners for the State of Oregon, sitting for the transaction of county business, Resolution 21-04-01-1, whereas child abuse is considered to be one of our nation's most serious public health problems, with scientific studies documenting the link between the abuse and neglect of children and a wide range of medical, emotional, psychological, and behavioral disorders. And whereas it is estimated that 1 in 4 children will suffer significant abuse before the age of 18, and annually over 80,000 Oregonian children are reported to the Department of Human Services as having been abused and neglected, with over 10,000 child abuse victims confirmed in 2020 alone. And whereas the physical, emotional, and financial impact of abuse and neglect falls most heavily on children of all ages and abilities who come from economic, racial, and social backgrounds, and these crimes affect many more family members, friends, neighbors, and community. It's like reading a teleprompter here. Whereas effective child abuse prevention efforts succeeded because of partnerships created among state and local government agencies, schools, faith communities, civic and community organizations, law enforcement agencies, and the business community, while recognizing that feeling connected to community can be a protective factor against child abuse. And whereas Yamhill County is dedicated to stopping child abuse and supporting survivors and their non-offending families while working to prevent abuse and neglect. And whereas each of us has a role to play in stopping child abuse and being part of a solution by learning how to prevent, recognize, and report child abuse, and supporting prevention, education, and empowerment programs for children and youth. Now, therefore, it is hereby resolved that the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners, on behalf of the citizens of Yamhill County, hereby recognizes the month of April as Child Abuse Prevention and Awareness Month on this first day of April 2021. Thank you for that. And thank you, Diane, for being with us today. So we have a motion to approve and adopt that resolution.
I move that we adopt this resolution.
We have a motion to approve. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. The motion passes. Diane, thank you for being with us. And I do want to just give a shout out to our Family Wellbeing Council, to Safe Families, to all of the organizations in our county that are working toward making sure that we mitigate and prevent child abuse. Because, as we've heard, once these kids are traumatized, they unfortunately wind up across the street in juvenile or in our jail. And we want to make sure that doesn't happen. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioners, for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 3, which is the consideration of a letter of support for Highway 22 and 51 interchange project as requested by Polk County. You've had a chance to look at the letter, and Commissioner Mordhorst reached out to me and said, back about a year ago, Commissioner Olson asked for a letter of support from us for the bypass, and now I'm asking for you to return the favor. Their shortfall is for this project is $73 million. So they have significant needs like we do for completion of our bypass. And I'm just asking that we take a look at that and submit that letter of support for the project that is important to them.
Thank you, Chair, if I may. I really appreciate you bringing this forward. And this is an intersection that sees so many cars every day. And so I'm happy to send a letter, join a letter of support.
Okay, so do we have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Bershauer. We have a motion to approve the letter of support. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion passes. Thank you. Item number 4, consideration of ratifying the acceptance of a quote and the authorization for the county administrator to execute an agreement between Yamhill County and Chubb Excess and Surplus Insurance Services, Inc. for the premise pollution liability insurance policy for the Whiteson and Newburgh landfills in the amount of $31,987.96, which is retroactive to March 29th, 2021 through March 29th, 2022. And Ken, do you want to just bring us up to speed on the necessity for this?
Yeah, so really quickly, and apologies that we're asked for ratification due to the length of time that it took to get the renewal process done. We were running up against the expiration of the policy. And so we went ahead and I signed it, and we were able to bind the insurance for the new year. And so we're asking for ratification. What this insurance is, it's a requirement under our DEQ permitting that we carry pollution liability insurance for the 2 former landfill sites that we manage the post-closure for. This is paid for out of the solid waste fund to pay for this insurance. And this is in addition to the other requirements, because we have some other funding requirements that we have to maintain as part of the post-closure permitting for those 2 sites. So this is a renewal for the next year, and then we'll be back again next spring with another renewal.
Thank you for being on top of that. So do we have a motion to approve?
I move that we approve item 4, the ratification of the insurance policy.
Motion to approve. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. The motion passes. So we'll close the formal session and move on to a public hearing, which is item J, the consideration of a mass gathering permit.
And Chair, just we do have an item 5, but that was mine that I brought to Ken to bring to the commissioners. But it's really, this one is not quite ready. So I'd love to bring it back next week, which is the discussion of, I think it's called the community funding requests from Representative Bonamici's office.
Oh, right. I have my old version of my.
You were in my mind apparently, because I was like, well, let's continue this because it's not ready yet.
Okay, great. But yes, I did see that, but it's on the updated agenda and I have the old one. So thank you for that. So then we'll move on to public hearings, which is the mass gathering permit application for the 2021 Memorial Weekend Boat Races event, May 27th, 28th, 29th, and 30th. And the applicant is the Newburgh Boat Club, Columbia Outboard Racing Association. And this has been a long time event in Newburgh, and I'm very happy to see this on the agenda. Dawn?
So Commissioner, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, if you want to open the meeting, I don't know if you have a virtual gavel there that you could slam to open the hearing. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Dawn. Thank you for being with us.
It's a pleasure. We're again hoping to get an application for Memorial Weekend for boat races. Boat racing community is looking forward to getting back into doing some boat racing again. And I don't know what to say outside of the fact that we have put our COVID plan together. We're all ready to get forward. All we need is permission and the okay to go ahead with it. As most of you know, this will be our 73rd year of hosting a race here in Newburgh, an official American Powerboat Association race. And any questions?
No, we're grateful that you have been so consistent and that this has been such a big part of the community over Memorial Day. So thank you, Dawn, and thank you for everybody who normally we get to see you in person once a year when you come and visit us. But it's nice to at least hear your voice, and I'm happy to see this on the agenda. So, Christian, do we need to discuss the waiver and the fee situation that we typically do with the boat races?
Yeah, traditionally the organizers have brought a check to the hearing in the amount of the reduced fee, which traditionally has been $250. But yes, now would be a good time to discuss with them. Oftentimes in the past, the board has reduced mass gathering application fees in recognition of the economic impact that these events have on the community, and also as an acknowledgement of the oftentimes the charitable components that these events have. So this would be a good time to discuss those with the applicant.
Dawn, thank you. We know every year you discuss what some of the donations are as a result of this. So do you have a particular organization that you'll be donating to this year?
Yeah, last year was a difficult year for us. As you know, the boat races is our fundraiser. Being so we did not have them last year. We only donated $2,500 to the Veterans Administration, or the veterans organization here in town. We also donated to the high school grad party. I believe those are the only two big donations that we made last year due to no income. One of the things that we're looking at this year with our COVID plan is, depending on how things open up between now and that, we may not allow spectators, which will hinder us some in our income, but still allow the boat racers to race.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for the donation to veterans and to the grad night. We appreciate that. And no donation is small. So thank you for doing that. So really the $250 is just covering the media costs and the notices that we have to give out, right, Christian? I mean, that's as low as we can go.
No, the board could go as low as zero. They have set it at $250 in sort of recognition of the fact that there are some administrative costs and some staff costs and time involved in processing these applications. So it's my understanding that that's been the level at which the board has set these reduced amounts.
Okay, so do we have a motion to consider the mass gathering permit and accept the lower lower fee? Oh wait.
Item, I'm sorry, one last item, Madam Chair, before you move to consider this. We've heard testimony from the supporters in support of the application. Just be good to ask if there's anyone there who would want to speak in opposition to this.
All right, do we have anybody joining us today virtually who would like to speak in opposition to the request for a mass gathering permit for the boat races? Doesn't appear that we have any, and we haven't received any information via email. So I'll go ahead and we can ask for, do I close this public hearing and then go on to a vote? So we'll close the public hearing and then entertain a motion to approve the mass gathering permit.
Chair, I move that we approve the mass gathering permit and the reduction in permit costs to $250.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes. Thank you, Dawn, and we look forward to seeing you out there at the boat races. Kristen, did you have anything in
Forward to
addition?
seeing you there also.
Oh, we lost Christian. Thank you, Dawn. Christian went away.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And now, there he is.
But now he's muted.
You got to unmute, Christian.
You got sucked into the vortex of.
I got stuck in the vortex. I'm sorry. I'm back now, but they muted me. I was just going to say, we'll work with the applicant now to collect the check, and then we do have a couple of other documents that we'll be collecting from them over the next couple of weeks and months. We need insurance paperwork, and we've heard from the sheriff and the fire departments and the parks, and everyone seems to be supportive of this. We've heard from Director Manfred. Her one question was whether or not this event would be allowed to proceed based on state guidance and restrictions. So we'll have to keep watching those, but hopefully we'll be at a point where we can have this event come late May. And then once we've received all the information, all the documentation and the payment, then we'll go ahead and send them an email, which effectively acts as the issuance of the permit. So those are the remaining steps.
Great, thank you. All right. So if there is nothing else, then we'll go ahead and reopen the formal session. And commissioners, do you have any announcements?
Chair, I just have one right now, which Takesha Wydrow from the Sheridan Revitalization Committee prompted, which is that the annual Sheridan cleanup is happening. Oh my goodness, I lost my notes here. I'm pretty sure it's April 16th, Saturday, April 16th. And it starts at Sheridan High School at 9 a.m. and they'll be, they're very well coordinated, and there's lunch at the end.
There is no free lunch, Commissioner. Got to
That's
work
right.
for
I
your
didn't
lunch.
say there was a free lunch. You have to
Okay.
come and pick up.
That's right. Thank you for that. I just wanted to say that last Friday, Todd argued before Judge Collins our Board Order 20-442, which was the resolution/board order that required court validation, which had some concerns about the reporting, the statistics regarding COVID-19 out of the state of Oregon, and asked that OSHA disclose that the health authority disclose PCR cycle thresholds, and that the court validation would allow for arguing before a court that there was not negligence on the part of someone who had received a citation from OSHA for a COVID violation. But unfortunately, the judge felt that this was not within our authority to approve something like this, so the court did not validate it. And I appreciate Todd's hard work on our behalf because he made a really good argument. So I appreciated listening to him argue that case. So is there anything else for the good of the order? Commissioner Bershauer, did you have any announcements?
Thank you, Chair. The only thing I had was a recap of Senator Merkley's call from yesterday, but we pretty much covered that, so I'm good to go.
Okay, well, if there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and adjourn today's meeting. Thank you all. Have a very happy Easter and enjoy the sunshine. Thank you.